Welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kane, he's Tom, and today we have a special guest, Mark Houpt. Last time we talked about contingency planning. Today we're talking about a story that Mark shared with us from when he was working to get his organization, FedRAMP, authorized. And because we have a guest on, we're doing tea reviews, not beer, as requested by Mark, who says that he takes his tea black. Mark, welcome to the show. Tell us about your choice of tea.
Well, my tea today is just a very simple iced tea from McDonald's. That's actually my favorite. They just like with Coke and other things, they've got this special blend that works perfect.
Fantastic. So we've got
Have
that.
to try
Tom,
that.
what do you got today? Have you snuck a beer into the show?
No,
Tom?
I am sticking with our typical glasses. So this is my beer glass, but I'm drinking Snapple peach tea today, which is my favorite tea. It's something I drink a lot of. It has 3 ingredients. It's got tea, it's got peach juice, and it has sugar. And I'm a big fan of the sugar as well. So that's what I'm drinking today.
Cool. Well, I didn't know. I thought it would be sacrilegious to drink iced tea out of a beer stein or a beer glass. Tom, am I using the right word? Beer stein or beer glass? Which one is it?
We are not. These are not steins. These are glasses. So.
Okay, so these are beer glasses. Well, I apparently have Lipton Pure Leaf brewed tea, which I am not familiar with, actually. So at least I'm trying something new.
The bottle will be really full.
You know, what's really nice here also is that I do not need to worry about the head on this thing. This is already the best show, I think. We should have Mark on every time from now on.
Well, hey, I'm willing to do that, but...
Oh, wow. This is not terrible. This is actually, I think to date, this is the best thing I've drank on this show. We will do tea reviews at the end, but this has got kind of a taste of lemon and a taste of tea, which is not a taste of beer.
There you
which
go.
It's kind of awesome.
Well, then maybe next time you got to try an Arnold Palmer or something like that.
I like
a little lemonade with a little bit of tea in it, right? The sweetness in it and the tartness all at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I remember I was out at a business lunch with an intern who just recently joined the company, and, you know, it's business executives, and we're ordering our drinks, and I get an Arnold Palmer, and goes to the intern who's sitting to my left, and he gets a scotch and soda. And we're all like, oh, no, because he thought that this was a good time to apparently get lit. He didn't know that an Arnold Palmer was just iced tea and lemonade. Yeah, it was much hilarity by all.
Back in the day when I was very much younger, I was part of, I can't remember what it's called now, but it was basically a bunch of high school kids that went into a college campus to be simulated government type of thing. A boys' state is what it was called. And I was up in Maine, and all the college kids having party fun on Friday night. They were offering everybody Long Island iced teas, and luckily, I chose not to do that because I wasn't aware of what it was, but I've since found out, of course, what it was, and I'm glad that I didn't, at age 16, grab one of those. Because who knows what would have happened, especially the next morning at 6 a.m. when I had to be up and running.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have made for a hard time. And just pivoting to what we were talking about before, because that's another story. I suspect there's more. But before we started recording, you were telling me a story, Mark, about you were in the approval process with FedRAMP. You had your security assessment report, your SAR, and you said that the GSA changed the rules on you. So can we start there with an overview of your experience with FedRAMP and the specific incident you mentioned where I guess rule changes affected your security assessment report?
Absolutely, but let's start just a slightly bit before that. And for those of you who have not been through a FedRAMP authorization, just keep in mind that leading up to this point, which we're going to talk about, takes 9 to 12 months of a lot of work, a lot of money by a company. And the average is $1.5 million to get to this point. So what happened was this is October 2017, that's 18, roughly that time frame. We had everything done. Our auditors, assessors were completed. They took the security assessment report to the FedRAMP GSA, and in that time frame, there came out a whole bunch of issues and vulnerabilities about Kaspersky being a vulnerability because they're based in Russia.
That supply chain issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the federal government said, no more Kaspersky. We thought, okay, well, we're not using Kaspersky. That's fine. But then when we got in front of the GSA, they said, oh, by the way, it's not just no more Kaspersky. It's now we're viewing all antivirus product that has metadata being removed from the environment. We're viewing that metadata as something that needs to be controlled in the same manner. We're like, okay, fine. We'll be happy to go back and meet any of those requirements. And they said, oh, no, you don't understand. We're not passing you until you've met those requirements. And of course, to make a very long story short, it took us another 6 months to do that because we had to go out and go back to our AV company. We had to move the product from the cloud to on premise, stand up servers. We had to get those servers tested and validated by the FedRAMP assessors and go through the SAR process again, all of the penetration testing, and then represent ourselves to the FedRAMP GSA before we could get approval. So they bottom line is they didn't accept the fact that they changed the rules midstream. They said, well, nope, this is an emergency directive. You have to comply, and we can't pass you until you.
Of course, Mark,
So it was fun.
that is indicative, I think, of any time you're working with the government where you're sort of at whim or at their whim for sure. You know, it's interesting to me that is was that a singular point of change for them, or had they changed a number of things and that was just the one that they happened to drive for?
No, that was a singular point, a singular issue specifically about Kaspersky, and wrapped up in that there were little nuances that said, hey, metadata is not allowed to go out for antivirus product. Where previously you were able to have a product that wasn't FedRAMP authorized because the data leaving the environment really wasn't anything that was of significance.
Yeah, it wasn't CUI.
Still isn't, quite frankly. But that's their rules. It's their way or the highway. And you have to look at it from one perspective. You have to look at it. That's a good thing. They're protecting government data. But what's interesting to me is how many times, just in the past couple of weeks, we've seen government entities that are actually GOV entities that are hacked because they're not following their own rules, but they apply the rules very stringently to CSPs, providers, cloud service providers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know CISA had a bit of a moment there in the media, and I believe at least one of the internet-wide scanners found a whole bunch of things that were not compliant. Right. But I want to go back to something, and Tom, let me put this question to you. Mark had mentioned something about a security assessment report or an SAR. Could you tell us a little more about the significance of the SAR and how it's going to factor into the FedRAMP approval process for our viewers who aren't familiar?
Sure. Well, the SAR is an absolute requirement. So you're going to have to create a SAR. You're going to largely, at least in our implementation, we're going to rely on our 3PAO to help us create that SAR. So for those who don't understand what 3PAO, it's a third-party authorization organization. So it's really a consulting firm that comes in. They've gone through a whole bunch of additional gates themselves to get designated as a 3PAO, but they will, in our instance, create the SAR report, and then they'll walk it through the process on the agency side. So, Mark, I'm curious, did you go agency or did you go right to the JAB?
No, we are agency. We avoided the JAB for a lot of different reasons, but straight to the agency.
Yeah, I am avoiding the JAB for all those same reasons reasons you did. I'm certain.
I'm sure you are. We could probably have an hour-long conversation about that.
Yeah, for sure. So Kane, to put a final point on the SAR, if you don't understand that and you're going through FedRAMP, you're going to have a bad time. That's a key pivotal document that you have to have in order to get through the process.
Okay, well, not only have to have, but be able to understand how to read it, because the results of that are going to depend on whether you make it through and what happens the following year as you fix things or do things that prepare for the next year.
Correct.
Yeah, and so it sounds like those rule changes of disallowing antivirus with metadata or exfil were kind of caused all kinds of chaos. Were you notified about those rule changes before your SAR was completed, or even after your SAR was completed, but before you submitted your package?
Well, that depends on who you ask. So the answer, my answer to that is no. We were not adequately informed of the requirements that were put there. We were informed that the Kaspersky situation was causing changes. we were informed that there would be, in fact, further requirements on us going down in the future. There was no indication that the GSA would take such a hard line on the situation. And it may be because this was the first time where Russian infiltration was concerned or alleged.
Hmm.
And so maybe they took a hard line on that. I don't know. Since then, I know from other stories from other people, they've taken similar hard lines. So it's also possible they had a policy change on the inside that they never really shared with us. But our 3PAO did inform us that the Kaspersky issue existed. They did inform us that in the future we might have to make some changes before our next assessment. But everybody, including our 3PAO, believed that we were ready to go, because going back to the SAR, getting through this process is also part of the responsibility of the 3PAO, and getting through it reflects upon their own integrity and their own ability.
Mm.
So it's almost as though the CSP and the 3PAO go together as a
That's
team.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unified front. Now, in
Right.
the if you're lucky and you've picked a good agency or a good 3PAO organization, they're going to make up the the forward element in terms of going
Right.
to war with the government over ATO. But certainly they're going to guide you and protect you. If they're worth their weight in payment, I suppose.
Well, yeah, it's interesting though that again with our story, our agency didn't care, and I guess that's a little flippant to say. Of course, they cared. They didn't. They didn't have a concern. They signed off on the SAR and did not have a concern. Even when we approached them after what we dealt with the GSA, used them to come back through the proper channels of the government and appeal the situation. Our agency said, "Oh, we're fine with what you're doing. Just correct it for the next time." And the GSA absolutely said no. And at that time, they had the backing of DHS with CISO as well.
Right. And you said that blew your schedule out by,
Oh
I
yeah,
think I think you'd said 6 months. So were there any other significant challenges that came up as a result of that 6 month delay?
sure. So the cost of it, we had to go back and renegotiate with our vendor. I my own integrity. I'd been communicating adequately and accurately to my C-level leadership at the organization, saying, "Hey, we're going to have this in about 3 months." And at that point, it was actually moving to the point where I was telling we were going to have it within 30 days, the actual authorization. And then when we didn't, that impacted the customer that was with us. We actually lost a customer because it took us another 6 months to be authorized. They needed to go to an authorized CSP faster, and also caused some bad will if they broke contract, and of course they ended up wanting some payback as a result of that. So there was a lot of financial costs. I would say close to $500,000 or more by the time we paid the 3PAO, by the time we paid the vendor, we built the servers that were inside. What I did is I got my entire team together in Salt Lake City. We just pulled everybody in, flew them all in, and said, we're going to pound this out in about a 2 week period to get it ready, because then we had to change all of our documentation in our SSP and everything in order to prepare it for the 2 to 3 month process that the 3PAO need to go through to revalidate everything because of all the changes that we made to it. To right, we had to add. We ended up actually, because of that, it wasn't just the antivirus that we had to change, but we also had to change a couple of other software pieces as well. That our 3PAO advised us, says, you know what, based upon the way they responded in October, November timeframe, let's just replace these other pieces of software as well, because we don't want to get back through the process by replacing antivirus and then turn around and find out, well, next one, the next one's going to get knocked out as well. So we just brought it all back in. So
Yeah,
we spent quite a bit of money.
that's smart. I think. You mentioned you had to renegotiate with the 3PAO
Mm-hmm.
and extend their contract. How much ownership
Yep.
did they take in that process?
Um, well, they took a lot of ownership in it, but more so from the fact that they were helping me, because my leadership, my CEO and COO, were really questioning whether or not I'd been telling them the truth all along, or if I was covering up the delays that I was making.
Ooh,
I mean, that's just that's a natural thought process.
Sure.
It's like,
it
hey,
is.
you've been telling us 30 days, 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. And then all of a sudden, now you're telling us 6 months and I've got to spend all this other money. Mark, what did you do wrong? And so my 3PAO stood up and they came in, they talked to our CEO and COO, and they told them, no, Mark has been telling you the truth, exactly what we've been telling him all this time. Is what we believe. So there was a credibility issue that both of us had to get through as well. Once we got through that, then it became fairly smooth sailing for both sides. But in the 3PO's defense, they did give us a financial break on it because they realized that we're all, that they advised us correctly, but we're all taken aback by the situation. But they also needed to cover their costs because they were also having to slide some of their other assessments off because the people that were on our assessment,
Mm.
we needed to wrap that up. So we had to work around a lot of issues together.
It sounds like they're a good
Yeah, and it
partner.
sounds like there's really a partnership there, just as Tom
Mm-hmm.
said, actually. I'm
Well, and,
wondering,
and to this
Mark, if
day,
you've
I'm
got
still
it.
friends with the guy that
See,
helped us
that's the
out. So,
thing. That's the thing. It sounds like you have to be friends or at least friendly,
mm-hmm.
which is a different relationship than we have with a lot of the audit or assessment community where it can be a little more contentious or adversarial. But I wanted to ask, in addition to like treat your 3PAO nice, what other key lessons would you say you learned from this experience with the FedRAMP rule changes?
First and foremost, I'm not going to tell my C-level people absolutes anymore. I'm going to share with them these stories and say, look, this is where I think we're at, but this is the kind of thing that could happen. And luckily, same C-level CEO, COO type of individuals that are in my company now are the same that were then. So we have that. So if I were to move to a different company, that's one thing I would learn. Secondly, is I would learn to, business doesn't typically, especially small business, doesn't typically go very conservative. And the government is extremely conservative. And I'm not saying that from a political perspective, of course. I'm saying it on a slow to implement and how they view risk and so on and so forth. So that's one of the things I learned in this process as well is to be conservative with the timing, uh, consider the worst case scenarios, and always go towards the safest side of things, because that's the way the government seems to operate.
Great lessons.
Tom, anything you think we can apply from this lesson here from Mark?
Well, there's, I learn from anybody I come across, and certainly Mark is no different. I would say we've been pretty conservative with our approach, but been aggressive still with our timeline. And there's probably some messaging in there that I should at least consider. So I'll take that lesson back. And I'll tell you one thing I've learned from Mark, and that's I'm going to go and check our antivirus solution this afternoon. So
Well, it's gotten even more stringent since that situation. I mean, you can go through your antivirus and make sure it still qualifies, but we recently switched over antivirus and just gone to the point now where we've only looked at and selected another antivirus, anti-malware product that is already FedRAMP authorized. So that's how I'm moving forward with features. If I'm going to put something inside of my environment, I'm only going to select a product that's already authorized. I'm not going to try and shoehorn them in. That's part of the conservative thought process. Is don't fight it. Don't don't
Yeah.
don't fight the government because you're not going to win.
Well, it also sounds like some of this is applicable to broader compliance efforts that you might be undertaking, Mark,
Mm.
where communicating absolute deadlines and taking a more conservative approach towards things might be successful, whether you're doing Sarbanes-Oxley or whether you're doing PCI or whether you're doing FedRAMP. Is that a fair
Well,
assessment?
I would say that with FedRAMP, go very conservative. Go more middle of the line with those other items you talked about, because lots of times you're dealing with auditors that have their own deadlines, and it's a process that is very predictable. You're not going to have a change for PCI or a change to HIPAA that's midstream. They just don't do that. The SOC 123, they don't do change midstreams. Probably the only other one that's like this would be State Ramp
Okay.
or maybe High Trust, where they
mm,
have boards that
Hmm.
govern themselves. I've not seen this out of PCI, even though they have their own board that governs themselves. They really do 2 to 3 years to implement. But there are boards in high trust and other types of situations that govern, and they could issue very quick edicts like that change the process. But things like ISO 27001, like PCI,
That goes
like
a while
HIPAA,
in between updates, doesn't it?
yeah,
I think it was
it
9
does.
years.
Yeah, not 5 to 10 years sometimes. I think we went 6 years on PCI with another 3 years to fully implement. And HIPAA, it's been since 2009 since high tech came into play and the updates on HIPAA. So you've got some runway with those and some predictability rules, whereas FedRAMP don't. Or, like I said, high trust, you may not.
So we as CISOs
Well,
tend to be pretty conservative just in general. So what you're really saying is, step even further towards a conservative range when you're dealing with FedRAMP, which I think is very, very
when
smart.
it comes to estimates. Yeah.
Which is very difficult for an entrepreneurial business that typically doesn't deal with government. I mean, I would say probably 95 or more % of our business is not government, and so we want to operate independently. We want to operate in accordance with our board. We want to operate in order to make money. The government doesn't quite look at it that way. It's just business.
That's a fair point and fair consideration, and something we might explore in a future episode. But Mark, we've hit the point in the show where we talk about what we've been drinking. I want to say that this is my favorite beer. If anybody ever asks me my favorite beer, I'm going to say Pure Leaf Real Brewed Tea. Best beer I've had this year, bar none.
I would change your language.
It's lemony.
I would change your language,
Sure.
Kane, and I would say your best brewed drink. Because it isn't a beer, but it is a brewed drink.
Yes, that is true. I have had kombucha before as well, and it's kind of it's not my thing. Although I hear it's very popular. But that's my beer review on this one. This is 10 out of 10 on a beer scale. On an iced tea scale, I don't have one of those, but it's quite good.
Nice.
Mark,
Tom, what about you? How are you rating yours? And Mark, how are you rating yours?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll say this. It's not a beer, which I have come to appreciate, being able to drink a beer during a work engagement here with this show. But this is still very good. This is Snapple peach tea. I drink it all the time anyway, so it's a nice nod to something I like very much. And in terms of my favorite teas, it is my favorite tea, so it's a 10 out of 10.
Easy day, Mark. Well, mine's a 10 out of 10 because it is not too strong and not too light. It's got that perfect flavor that overcomes the blandness of water. So I'll give it a 9 or a 10 out of a 10. This is my go-to.
Awesome. And with that, that's all for today. Please do like and subscribe to not miss any updates. With that, again, thank you, Mark, for joining us. Tom, great seeing you as always.
Thank you.